Hey everybody, Michael McGinnis here with the Ripple Effect. Here we've got band plus two now. We've got a lead singer, Rachel, over here. And Bruce, what instrument do you play?
Trying to work the saxophone.
Work the saxophone. All right, good.
Oh,
All right,
oh.
that means a little jazz today for everybody. That's the jazz ensemble. So here we go. Today is Richard going to really be starting things off. We've missed him the last couple of weeks. And what brought a lot of us together was this spiritual group referred to as the priesthood. And it was just a bunch of spiritual people that are people who had a spiritual quest in mind. And, we had all these adventures together, talks, conferences, et cetera. But one of the common denominators there was about really this whole idea of protecting Mother Earth, as came to know it as the challenges facing the Earth today. A lot of the different groups and meetings in Egypt and other places were about healing the Earth, planting our spirituality, love and affection to the planet in this way. So Richard's really going to today talk about sort of that evolution, with where we are today, but he's going to begin from a very historical perspective and to really talk about, from the origins of humanity here on Earth to where we are today, and with an accent really on where we are today. And so with that, Richard, want to jump in?
Here we are. I want to say first off, this is my best understanding from what I've heard from Tom Sawyer or read or met with other people. I don't claim to be an expert at all, but I'll offer the best I have. I wanted to talk about, a lot that's been on my mind lately is how we are doing as humanity and as a country right now. And to really see where we are, I wanted to back up, but I ended up in my notes, ended up backing all the way to the entrance of human souls to the three-dimension materiality of Earth. And that the souls who first came in to kind of play with the Earth and trying to see what it was like. It's kind of like, in my poor understanding, watching other people have fun by seeing the animals eating and swimming and devouring each other, whatever they were doing. To watch that was intriguing enough to dive into it and become part of it. To have that experience of what it is to be a three-dimensional being. And in doing so, got lost, forgot their spiritual roots and couldn't get back out, became too attached to the physical world and all that goes with it, all the psychological and emotional connections that happen there. So a second wave of souls came to the Earth under, and I was, as I read, led by the entity that would eventually become born as Jesus of Nazareth. They came knowing they would have to get into spirituality the same way that the first wave had, but remember their spiritual roots in order to help work back out and bring the lost ones back out. So you can, if I may not have this right at all, but it may be that the first wave was referred to in the Bible as, no, I can't say it off clearly enough, but Tom referred to that second wave without a title as being simply the core group. And he identified people that he met after his near-death experience as the ones who were in the core group seemed to hang around him, or they were doing their work elsewhere. And that group is on the Earth in physical bodies trying to help the first wave to work their way out and it's not working. And the entity that became Jesus of Nazareth came several times in an unborn fashion. It's like one of the lifetimes was Melchizedek. And I don't remember all the names. People in the Bible that you read had lived 800 or 900 years. Glenn Sandiford did a very scholarly book on that called Lives of the Master, in which he traces the different lives of the entity that became Jesus of Nazareth. They, uh, I need that hole in the head again.
Richard, if I can interject, he Glenn just recently passed last year. He was living near here in Richmond and at an assisted living facility, and just want to let you guys know that he did recently just pass.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, he had great pain in his legs. Was from a car accident or something in his
He was
body.
he was shot in a burglary attempt at his home in Louisville many years ago.
Ah,
He lived with a lot of pain, great
yeah,
deal of pain. He was quite a human being, I must say.
yeah. I remember meeting him a couple of times. I was very impressed by how quiet he was about the level of pain he was in. And Tom saying that so many times that he had reached out to try and help him with whatever Tom had available to him for that pain, but was never successful with it. So while I would miss him, I'm glad he's graduated. So these two groups of souls are involved in the earth, and the master soul is helping, constantly trying to get them out. Uh, Tom referred to it as if you have a machine that isn't working correctly, the machine being humanity on earth, and you try a drop of oil in the right place, and you try a drop of oil in another place, and another drop of oil, and it isn't working. And those drops of oils would be those lifetime, unborn lifetimes of Melchizedek and whatnot. And then finally using the absolute best oil, which was Jesus of Nazareth, who uh, was not, as in Tom's words, if I can get this right, not ordained to become, but was at the beginning. Like so many, like Buddha and whatnot, and oh, the name's escaping me right now, but so many prophets through the ages, Mohammed and whatnot, were ordained to become. Jesus was not ordained to be, but was born as. So all these times, and he came to be born into humanity to take on all the difficulties of humanity, to feel the hunger, feel the heat, feel the, if you get a cut, stuck with a thorn, to feel rage, to all the things that humanity feels, in order for spirituality to know what that is. And as Tom said, you could still argue that even that has not worked to bring humanity out of its attachment to the three-dimensional world. You still find people using the name of Jesus in pretty unsavory ways. Uh, so what? So this NDEs, we come up to our lifetimes, and Tom has said that from 1945 onward, millions of people were born specifically for the purpose of having a near-death experience. Millions more than actually did have. And that process could be compared to trying to create a spiritual army on earth. That all of these people would be born for the purpose of having an NDE, for the purpose of becoming more spiritual in that experience, in that NDE, and thereby creating this huge spiritual army, not just a person talking about what spirituality should be, but millions of people offering what they have learned in their experience. We're still in that process, of course. So we're working on that. And what occurred to me is now that we have a new administration here in the United States, I was looking through, oh, yeah, Tom's book about Tom Sawyer and the spiritual whirlwind. He has a chapter about spiritual politicians, politicians who maintain a degree of compassion for the earth, for other people, rather than being thoroughly wrapped up in power and money. And the need for that, and he saw in probably 95 or so. Uh, Bruce, do you remember when that book was being written, compiled? I can't hear a word you're saying.
I'm sorry. It came out in 93, I think, 92, somewhere in there.
Okay,
Late 80s, early 90s.
right. I looked through it and there isn't a date. I didn't find a date in it. It was, and just to say, it was Bruce's mother who compiled this. You can't see her name well here, but it's Sydney Saylor Farr. That's for all the other people that may be looking at this. But he was talking then in the early 90s about the need for spiritual politicians and expected to see them within 10 years. And now that we're in 2021 and we've just gone through 4 years of perhaps the least compassionate, least spiritually minded administration that I can remember, now we have a change of tone. And we have, with Biden in there, he's certainly had great losses in his life, with his wife and his son, and was it his wife and child in an earlier time? But, and great losses like that can be a heart-opening experience for someone. Whether him and some of the others who've recently been elected follow through on that or not, well, we're yet to see. You know, it looks okay now, but let's see how it all keeps going. Because in politics, there's so many pressures from so many areas about what to do. We just keep hoping for the best with it. One of the excuse me. One of the things the politicians need to look at is 4 and 5 generations beyond the one we're living in. Like the XL pipeline that was just stopped. They just stopped the building of it. That was going to carry tar sands oil from Canada across the plains of the United States. And that's, in my view, that was a short-term profit-driven choice to build that. And the long-term difficulties of it were ignored, or given far less priority than the immediate money-driven aspects of it. This tar sands oil is thicker than other crude oil, so it requires more pressure to drive it through the pipeline, which increases the possibility of leaks, and it's more toxic than standard crude oil. So it's worse to the environment, to the water supplies that it might spill into in the future. And to stop the building of it can be seen, hopefully, I'm seeing as a look forward at future generations, not just this generation now. You know, maybe there won't be a leak for 10 years, but after that, once it's leaked, that leak can't be cleaned up. You know, it soaks into the ground and it gets into the water supply, and there it is. Much like fracking in Pennsylvania. My brother, youngest brother, still lives on the farm we grew up on, and the house that sits there has been there since 1860, fed by a spring coming out of the hill, a natural spring coming out of the hill up behind the house. And since 1860, these generations of people have lived there, living off that spring, the water from that spring. Now that they've done fracking, that water is no longer drinkable, and they've no idea how long it's going to be undrinkable for. My brother has to buy drinking water because what comes out of the tap, it smells bad, and you wouldn't want to, you know, without any scientific knowledge at all, you just look at it and go, no thanks, and set it aside. So there's these long term results of immediate decisions. The money that fracking brought to the area benefited a lot of people. That money is now spent and gone, and the bad wells, my sister also can't drink her own water. That will go on for possibly generations yet. So they who were so happy to have fracking happen are in the process of reconsidering whether it was really a good thing or not. Are they going to have to go out and buy water for the rest of their life? They don't know. They're waiting to see on that. But there seems to be an increase in compassion in the world. And one of the things I recently found out was the video of George Floyd's death went around the world. It wasn't just a local thing to the area that he was in. It wasn't just national. It went around the world. This fellow kneeling on his chest was so unconcerned with the life of the person he's kneeling on. That touched people in a way that they needed to be touched. You know, and I'm looking at it, and I've had a few years of judo training, and in judo you're allowed to choke someone out. And when they go out, they immediately boom, go instantly limp, and you can feel that occur, and you stop. You quit putting whatever pressure on, and they most often pee their pants because the sphincter muscles let loose, and you can smell that as well. And this guy, sorry to, for this guy to be so unconcerned and just keep kneeling on him it was really hard to watch. But the fact that bless you, the fact that it went around the world so quickly was an indication that the compassion, that there's a general increase of compassion in the world. People who've never been to the United States were concerned about how that occurred. And I talked to unfortunately, some of my relatives. They just didn't see it. Some of them just didn't see how horrifying that was. And I've tried to talk with them about a number of things over the past 4 or 5 years now, and they are immovable. I recently read or heard a podcast about the American government's attempt to denazify German army officers after World War II, and every program they came up with failed. They could not break those people away from their belief in Aryan supremacy. And in fact, every time you tried to tell them, show them with facts, figures, anything, they tended to react by holding more tightly to this sense of Aryan supremacy. And they went to their graves still believing in Aryan supremacy. And yet their children rejected it. And it occurred to me that that may be the time scale we're working on here in trying to reach the people who strongly supported the previous administration. So the current administration, I have great hopes for. I'll wait and see how they turn out. Uh, but one of the things that occurred to me that Tom had said way back is we cannot Pollyanna our way through this by just going, well, just be happy and everything will work out, which was a common thought when, for me at least, when I first got introduced to spirituality, met Tom, and the concept of don't worry, be happy, it'll all work out. Everyone will obviously choose the more compassionate path forward. And Tom said, no, they won't. We're not going to be able to Pollyanna our way through this. It's not as simple as don't worry, be happy, that song by Pharrell Williams. But you still have to apply the song, don't worry, be happy. And then after you're happy, then go to work. Doing the work that's needed to upgrade yourself and the rest of humanity. This is where my notes end. So I kind of see ourselves as still, whereas Tom had said that the earliest opportunity for a complete spiritual transformation of the earth was 1988. He was fully expecting that to occur. Then it got changed to 19, and it didn't occur, so he understood 92 was a possibility. That didn't occur. He understood 96 was a possibility. That didn't occur, and he ended up saying the last thing in the Whirlwind book was, we are in a period of grace. We've been given a grace time to get our act together before anything Armageddon-like might occur, or apocalyptic. And I see that's where we're at. That's what we're working at with how we treat each other on the street, how we treat our family, how we treat the people we meet on the street or in the grocery store, and the kind of politicians that we elect. We're in this process of trying to regain the spirituality we had lost way, way back in the beginning. It's kind of like you could see the full history of humanity as if it was one person's life. The baby is born and they're more spiritual than physical. And they learn to make their body move and figure out how eyesight works and whatnot. And they go forward, and through the teenage years, they can lose a lot of their spirituality. And the young adult years, they're trying to build a life and make things happen. And in later years, trying to regain that spirituality they now understand that was available and they had lost for a period of time. Tom had said that is one explanation of a perfect life, to lose your spirituality and then regain it. It's the regaining of it is an experience you can only have. It's an incredible experience you can only have by having lost it. And that's where we are now as humanity, is in that regaining. That makes sense to anybody?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yep. You know, Richard, thank you very much for sharing that perspective. I want to ask us to, we'll go around and maybe just give our own sort of reflections, thoughts based on what you shared. And then I'd also love to come back and talk about, so what can we do, to help in this as individuals, right? That's a key denominator to that. And I'm going to just start reaction just real briefly and then turn it over to the others. I'm going to just share my screen for a second.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
while you were talking, it was really interesting. Is I just did quick search and found this text, International Journal of Humanities and Social Science, The Crisis on Modern Human Spirituality. And it was interesting because, as you were talking about some of the pitfalls and things here, it's crisis on modern human spirituality is marked by the emergence of modern materialism. And he goes into really just, the aspects that we all see and know here every day with respect to it. And then it was interesting because, what I noted here is there was their own historical perspective, beginning in the 17th century, which started rationalism supremacy, right? As you were talking about the supremacy era, et cetera, that was there, and just this whole thing of dogmatic religion. And, just so it was, I didn't have a chance, obviously, to read through. I just did skim ahead to the conclusion, and it said that spirituality is a form of a person's spiritual personality, while moral is a complement of spiritual activities that consists of two forms, or both, and I'm not sure how to pronounce these names here, maybe somebody else's. But the effect of it would be more humane, more modern humans would be more humane if spirituality is always included in intact personality. So again, I'm not sure exactly what that is. I presume that means that that's more of who we are. They do not separate between the world and hereafter, the material and spiritual, and the existence of equilibrium. So humans could bring this world into a civilization that is humanizing a man. So just a reference point, but it was interesting while you were talking through this, because I know from my own perspective is we see this. And I recall the conversations Tom had with respect to the whole flow or waves of spiritual help and assistance that's come in here, and near-death experiences has been certainly one of those too. So anyway, I just wanted to share that perspective. What other thoughts, perspectives based on what Richard shared?
Well, first, I want to say I don't blame you for reading while I talk. I do the same thing. I bore myself to death.
There's something I do all of the time. If there is such a thing as being able to walk and chew gum at the same time, I'm not sure, but it's, but it's the kind of thing that I love. I love the reference points, and it's always nice to be able to just find and collect other information as you can so quickly today. And
Yeah.
that to me is what's absolutely outstanding. It is one of the benefits of technology, although at the same time, I'd say is not only materialism, but it's technology that's also challenging the future and state of humanity as well, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, as I understand what you were saying about or showing us about personality, um, that it's the bringing together of the human experience and the spiritual experience into one being rather than it being separated. As many people see God over there, heaven is out there someplace. When you die, you go to heaven. We stop being here. So there's this sense of that the human existence or the person, the incarnation, if you will, is somehow less spiritual
Yeah.
than spirit or whatever. So it's really the bringing together, and then those beings who were caught up in that first round, that the Christed beings, as I see it, it's not, I mean, We talked about this before, that in a sense, Christ, the body of Christ, is now us. Jesus is, where's Jesus?
Yeah.
Is he over there someplace? So I will pray to Jesus and the angels, come and help us out, please. So really, we're at the point at which the incarnation, those of us that have incarnated during this time that Tom was talking about, um, and as we mentioned last week, you don't have to die to have a near-death experience. I mean, you don't. You don't die. In a sense, you die, but you don't like give up. You don't lose your body.
Yeah.
And I think that some people have near-death experiences in their sleep and don't even know it, or they have an out-of-body experience that could qualify as a near-death experience. And this is something that Tom also talked about, and we mentioned that last week. Um, that the process of awakening does not require an injury
Right.
or some kind of experience like that. Um, it can simply be that you are now transformed. You have given up the old life for a new life. Or so anyway, this idea of personality, um, because that's where we get into the ego. And we talk about the ego versus, you know, the spirit self. That the ego is a necessary thing to have for us to be human.
Hmm.
We need our ego because that helps us. But it's bringing the ego and the spirit into a function just as in male and female, or in any counterparts. Where you put the puzzle pieces together, any one puzzle piece by itself is not the answer, but it could be that one puzzle piece that is completing the larger puzzle, which we're all puzzle pieces, let's just say. And so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little squares here. We've got a little puzzle going. And so each one of us has something to contribute that makes this a whole. And if you look at humanity as each specific person is um, is potentially the answer to a prayer, or
Yeah.
potentially the missing piece for some situation or another. I recall an experience that Isa and I had, my wife who died in the car accident. We went to Germany during the time when the Berlin Wall, just before the Berlin Wall came down. And we had a ceremony or a series of things at Sedona, just behind where you are there, Richard, at Bell
Yep.
Rock, and talked about what was needed, and our spirituality and the kinds of things we need to do. And Dan had taught us, or talked to us about um, AAO, or the AEO. I like to think of it as AAO, the three actual vowel sounds.
Yep.
And somehow that's a bringing together of higher and middle and lower energies bringing together. So Isa and I went to Germany, as we often did, because she's German, to visit the family and so forth. And it was actually inspired by some things that Tom had said about our work, and Stan had said about things that you might be able to do to help humanity. So it occurred to me that we're going to Germany, and the um, things had started to heat up in Germany during that time. People were starting to rebel against the separation of the East and the West, and people were starting to um, to seek to unify Germany. And so I thought, well, let's see what Isa and I can do while we're there. We're going and that summer, and so we went to the Berlin Wall, and I had the idea of going when there wouldn't be anybody else around, sometime in the night, and trying to touch both sides of the wall. And the way that we did that was we went to one of the checkpoints, And she put her hand on one side of the wall, and I went and we held hands, and I went around to the other side and touched the other side. And we did a very simple ceremony there with the intention of unifying East, or, the East Germany and West Germany, just in the middle of the night, just the two of us, very simple thing. And I did this vowel sounds, and we said some prayers, and that was it. And then so we came back after our trip, and a year later, we were at Bell Rock, in fact, in Sedona, when the wall, when that whole sitting on the wall and tearing the wall, everybody was fed up and they started breaking down the wall. You probably remember that.
Yeah.
And it was this whole big thing. And so all these people came together, and they were not going to be kept apart anymore. And it happened. And the wall started coming down and the changes took place. And that was exactly a year from when we did that. And so I had talked to Tom about that, and he said, well, there was, when we went back to Germany several, years later, to look at fragments of the wall. I still have a little fragment of the Berlin Wall. And I also have a piece of barbed wire from the Berlin Wall that I have. It's rusted and old, but I keep that as a sacred object. We talked about objects last time, of the pain, of the suffering from all of that, and the keeping people out at all costs. So when we went back to the wall, there was a statement written on one section of the wall I don't remember the exact quote, but it's basically that one drop, um, it takes many drops for change, let's just say. Many drops cause big ripples, big ripple effects. So, and so one little thing that you might do that seems like an insignificant thing could have an effect. And I asked Tom about that, and he said it definitely does. And that could well be something like that you would do just with the intention of going to a place and making a gesture or making a prayer, or and it wasn't, of course, just that we did that ceremony. There was the interactions with people. There was your daily life when you might run across somebody and have a kind word. It's the intention. And so the ceremony would create an intention to live in a way that was embracing the whole, or was trying to unify. And so that was just, to me, it was one of those aha experiences where we did something in the middle of the night, and maybe that was the drop. Maybe that was the extra drop that was needed, because it was so obvious that there was an effect, and that it had to do with timing, and it had to do with intention. And I'm not taking credit for the Berlin Wall coming down, but I'm just saying that if you don't do that, that missing drop might not happen. You might not have that one drop. Your drop is equally valid or important as the next drop. But if you withhold your drop and don't do something, that may be what is the failure.
Yeah.
We were talking last week about, about acting with intention and consciousness, Tom. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really key, as individuals, but also consciously bringing that into our lives and our work. Jeff and I were talking about today, what happens, like how it seems to me that there are lots of people working in a conscious way right now. I was telling him about, Sounds True has what they're calling the inner MBA. And I had talked to another friend of mine who works in a corporate setting, who said that he had they had like a corporate coach who was working with them about on mindfulness and using your consciousness to provide the results that you desire. And and I just feel like that's personally, I feel like that's growing. I feel like it was really interesting to talk to my friend who was like, oh yeah, our coach is a former minister who felt like he couldn't really make the impact that he desired in his parish, and had decided to take his spiritual concepts into corporate America and teach them as a results-based, with a results-based strategy to, okay, you want to make things happen in your company. This is an approach that works, but it's not just an approach that works for business success. It can also, it's about realizing human potential. And I feel like it's just interesting to me that there are lots of people that are beginning to lead with the intention of raising consciousness, with the and the intention of helping people to realize their inner resources. And I mean, so I feel personally, I feel hopeful. I mean, I think in 2020, I certainly felt great despair watching the pandemic, watching all of the killings of Black people at the hands of police, at the hands of just citizens that were chasing them down and killing them. But I also felt like, for me, 2020 was definitely, I certainly experienced despair, but it also made me go, I have to be engaging in a way that has a broader impact in the world. I have to do something that's going to have more of an impact than I'm already having in the world. And so, so George Floyd was absolutely seen and heard around the world. And, and Tom, I feel like that was, it's like, that was an experience, that was a wake-up call. I think people responded to it because so many people are experiencing violence and injustice and oppression. And it was a way that the globe could go, whoa, and have our collective eyes open. I mean, I realized that I've had the privilege of not having those kinds of experiences. So, I mean, I feel like it was an awakening experience. I feel like COVID has been an awakening experience. And, it's just like, so I personally am feeling hopeful. I'm feeling hopeful that we are evolving towards an understanding of our interconnectedness and of our oneness and of our spiritual nature, and I feel like, you talked about politicians, Richard, and I'm like, there are examples of countries around the world that are creating policy that works for people and policies that work for the planet.
New Zealand. It's a great place.
It's like, right. It's like there are places that are doing it. They're creating concrete policy, for the next 7 generations. So it's like, personally, I feel hopeful. And yes, I think you're right. We have work to do. I mean, and right, don't worry, be happy. It's like, because, you can't access your inner resources if you're just feeling totally crushed, and it's like, okay, but it is like, what, I guess for me, I'm at the point of saying, what's my part? What's my next step to doing, to serving in the world?
Yeah. Excellent.
I think that political issue is thorny because there are a lot of people that are very jaded or very cynical, uh, and will say, well, they're all crooked. All politicians are crooked. And it won't do any good anyway. I mean, it's just this whole conspiracy theory thing sprang out of some of that, um, this pessimism, you know, and to be able to bring some of our friends I know, and we live out in the boondocks, um, Floyd County, Virginia, and were maybe less so now, but when I first came out here, there were a lot of people in the alternative community that just gave up on voting and gave up on political pursuits, and we're just back to the land and doing their um, in spiritual in their own sense, but gave up on politics. And it was always frustrating because I think, well, okay, maybe there's a whole bunch of people in politics that aren't necessarily thinking about the greater good, but there are people and that do that are. It isn't 100%. It isn't a one or all. So, and I think that really, um, what you're saying, Richard, gives some impetus to try and help those people who aren't trying, who have given up, to what can we do to encourage them to, well, no, it isn't all bad. Here's an instance where there is somebody that I trust. I mean, I know this person, and this person, I just like we know Tom Sawyer, and we think, well, all these spiritual, that's all baloney, all this spiritual hogwash. But that's somebody we knew. And so that gave us a sense of trusting. So if we look at, well, who is it that trusts me? Who trusts my word? And those are maybe the people I could reach out to who already respect me in some form or fashion. And if I say so about something, maybe they'll listen to me. Maybe some people won't because they just don't. There's enough of us that we have the ear of enough different kinds of people and enough circles of people that we might be able to touch a large enough circle to have some influence. That's why we have so many differences of personality. That maybe I would appeal to somebody that you wouldn't, or maybe you would touch somebody in a business realm that I wouldn't have a connection with. Look at my long hair and beard and say, he's a hippie, or something, and just write me off right off the bat. So anyway, those are some thoughts I have about.
The two things that you said bring up something in my mind. One was forgetting now who it was, but somebody who was big in the Senate, like Ted Kennedy when he was a big name or something. Somebody approached him and said, "This is what needs to be done, and here's why." And he listened to the whole thing and said, "Yes, you're absolutely right. Now make me do it." Meaning he wanted to, but it was pressure from the constituency that would justify him bringing it up to the other senators. That's our job. That's where not just voting for them and then wait and see what happens, but actually put, write to them or whatever, give them a call, whatever, and say, "This is what's important to me.
Yeah.
Now represent me."
Let them know. Let them know that you have this feeling,
Exactly.
and not just sit on it. Yeah.
And the other thing was Tom Sawyer once was trying to describe a spiritual concept to Carol and I. And as he's sitting there going over this thing, Carol was going, "What?" And I said, "Let me try and get this, put it in an analogy. From spirituality, a good thing was to happen, sent from spirituality. And it was looking for a place to occur, meaning that whatever this good thing was, this energy was coming down looking for a receptive location, a receptive person to occur through." And that I'm reminded of that analogy about your when you're talking about you and Issa putting your hands on the wall.
Mhm. Yeah,
Things
I
are,
think we were just vessel at that point.
exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Hey Tom,
Yes.
I ran around the house and got in your picture.
I saw you out the window there. I don't know that you were in the picture, but we'll find out because this is recorded.
That chair.
Yeah, and he lives 100 miles away from you too.
Oh yeah, that was
Yes.
telepath. What is that? Teleluminal.
Teleportation.
Yes. Superluminal telepathic
There
communication.
you go.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
there
it.
you go. You know, a couple of things, Tom, you just shared. What I really like where you went with that is, you know, you shared something that we can do, right? You were called to do this and you did do it. And I share the same belief as Tom had mentioned that, you know, we're all equal, all look the same. It's not a better or worse, but it's that contribution, right? It's and what are you contributing? And in that case, you contributed. I like that a drop on that too. And Rich, I really like the conversation because to me, there's a couple of things that really stood out as you talked about the sort of the ideal evolution Tom was talking about of a human being that would sort of start off spiritual, live life, get consumed by the day to day, and then come back to that spiritual. And here we are, right? The common denominator, I think, of all of us here, and I can definitely speak for myself, I'm saying that's very characteristic of me, is okay, you know, the day to day work is done, now I can really resume. And that's where all of these things have emerged. This meeting, the things that I'm doing, the blogs writing, I just writing my blog here is spirituality in the workplace. You know, just because my audience is so many of the business people is to try to bring in this sort of tone or conversation that Rachel was just talking about, you know, in terms of the gentleman doing with respect to his teachings on that. And I think it's really because I think that's really common denominator here is in terms of doing it. You talked about to the Rachel had mentioned about, you know, how down people got during the pandemic. And, you know, me, like everybody else, had initially experienced that. And that's where I really started to dig deep and realize, you know what, I can't give into this. I've got to really help people as I'm walking around the neighborhood. I'm seeing the long faces or whatever. And I started to change my tone of voice after I had worked on myself to be more positive and tuned. And I shared, no, you know, I really don't think it's that way. I can understand it. I've been feeling that way, but you know what? You know, think of all of the advantages that this is providing you. Is there something that you're doing now that you've never done before? Yeah, getting work done around the house. Yes, really good. You know, so I said there's so often these kinds of things that uh, it's easy. It's let me back say is that it's easy to succumb to the negativity. It's easy to become that. It's easy to become apathetic, right? With respect to the voting, everyone else here. I had 4 years of a political appointment. I became so apathetic about it because I was immersed in the day to day of this politics and struggle and ego and just seeing the power magnitude and how many of the good people were getting hurt by the greed and power process to it, but it was easy to become apathy. The hard part is to really be able to not be consumed by that, become one of them, but to be able to step outside of that. And I think that's exactly what's been happening to me in the last year or two is reemerging myself as is that positive human being that's just sharing my love and spreading the words, the kind words, compassion, in little different ways. And that was really the message of this. The ripple effect, as you just said it, is that it's really about being able to just start doing that good, just like we received from the others, like Tom and so many others. Now it's our turn to really to be able to go to start giving that back in just these small little ways, like your touching of the Berlin Wall, which is actually sounded like a lot bigger way than I think you may give it credit to, but because I just on that I recall the whole experience and I remember Dan Chesbro saying when we had that celebration in the pyramid everything is that you will see evidence of this work. I just know it. I can't speak what it is. I don't know what it is, but you'll see evidence of this work. And it was shortly after that period of time that the Berlin Wall, I know I was in South Africa and I was witnessing the end of apartheid, and just watching this ravages. And I was in the townships where I was volunteering, seeing the incredible pain and suffering, but beginning to start seeing the small little dent being the end of apartheid, like the coming down at the end of the Berlin Wall. And my view of the evolution of humanity right now, because the pandemic included, is that we're all struggling to sort of move away from the ego, the me, towards the we. And the we is we're all in this together. We're the oneness and things of which we start operating collective. Even I just heard yesterday a core lesson from the pandemic as these leaders on vaccine thing did. He goes, the mistake was is we all approach this individually. We all did this independently, so every company was doing it. Imagine if we worked together quicker and sooner on this and got beyond the borders of which we're in, to be able to work on these things a lot more quicker and with a very consistent approach, so on and so forth. And we all could have followed what New Zealand had done, shared for us. But anyways, those are thoughts.
I would say one quick thing about the Berlin Wall experience. Prior to that, we had relationships with East Germans, Isa and I, because she lived in Berlin for quite a while and had friends that were East German. And we would go to East Germany when you could visit there, and had conversations and friendships with people that were East German, and heard their side and spent time with them and really felt the oppression that they felt. And so it wasn't just to go to some special place and do this ceremony, but prior to that, there was an actual connection with the people there. And I think it's important to make the daily commitment to the nitty-gritty of the interactions with people, and then the ceremony has much more power, because you've not only have done the ceremony, but you have done it with the coupling of having done the physical part. So that's again the blending of the spiritual and the physical part, that it takes both, or it takes a multiplicity of factors in causing that power, and to not undermine or underestimate the power of what you do. I mean, there are people that have tremendous effect on other people or in the situations, and are crossroads or are sparks for change. That they literally, that person, that circumstance did make a difference. And so it's not to overdo yourself and ego, but also not to underestimate your power.
Well said.
Couple things that popped into my head as we talk about this. And, one is, and it's been discussed, is the bringing back the integration of what it is to be living is spiritual. And that we have allowed ourselves to become separated, and we go to church on Sunday, and then there's the other 6 days of the week, in which we're kind of free to do what we want to do. And then we can go back to church on Sunday, regardless of what the church is, and receive redemption or whatever, and then just go back and do the same thing all over again. So the idea that we have to bring spirituality into our existence, our work, our play, is there a separation? No. It's mind-boggling to think that we actually think there is. It's like trying to separate yin and yang. It's like trying to separate Shiva and Shakti. You can't do it. For us to think that we can is part of this huge mistake. The other thing that pops into my head is that phrase that was in what you had on there, self-actualization or actualization, I think was the word. And in order for, at a certain level, looking at it from this plane, for us to actualize ourselves, we have to have space in life to do that. If I'm worried about my safety, if I'm worried about where my food's coming from, if I'm worried about my material existence in this body, and that's where I spend all my time, if I'm working 8, 10, 12-hour days just to get by and don't have access to what it is necessary to live a fulfilling life, good food, some level of freedom where I have some time to actually be present, to quiet down. And, so many people live in an existence that is just stress from the beginning to the end of the day. They get home, they turn on the TV, and they relax for a few minutes, whatever that means. And then they go to bed, and then they do it again. And so the role of us, and on a certain level, the role of those of us who are in politics, is to create an environment where people can actualize themselves. That doesn't mean everyone has to be a millionaire, but everyone needs access to food. Everyone needs to get good food. If you don't have good food and you're feeding yourself crap because that's all you can afford, you're not going to feel good. And if you don't feel good, how are you going to spend time thinking about, the divine oneness of Brahman? If you're looking at other people around you and they're threatening to you, how are you going to see them as an aspect of Brahman? How are you going to see them as that divine essence? So part of the issue is creating a society that uplifts everyone and doesn't leave people behind.
Love it. Well said.
I just got to throw this in. I'll ask forgiveness later. If you're creating a society that leaves people behind, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot.
Oh no, now this just became R-rated. Hey, hey, how about that saxophone player there? We haven't heard some of your notes.
There's the joke. Right there. Good joke. Good joke.
I tried to unmute. Oh, goodness. I've enjoyed listening to everybody's thoughts. And just to pick up with Jeff and everybody about the George Floyd thing, one thing that this past year has taught me is how very fortunate we all are to have been born white.
True.
Chauvin, the reason it was so startling to us was because Chauvin was a reflection of us. George Floyd are the people you're talking about, Jeff, who do struggle and where are they going to? Where's the big tide that's going to raise all the boats on a spiritual way for people like that? I agree with you, but certain people in the country, Richard's family members would say, well, that's just giving them handouts. That's socialism. We don't want that, with no empathy whatsoever. Yes, I feel very privileged to have been born in this country, and I'm not struggling for food. And I do have time to meditate and feel, my spirituality. And I'm very grateful for that. But yeah, it's great that the Berlin Wall came down and South Africa ended apartheid. I hope we can end the apartheid in Palestine. I hope North Korea can finally become free. There's a lot of places on the planet that really are really bad off, and the people really are oppressed. And even Russia is an autocracy now, and it's just, gosh, we almost became one. But yeah, the world is really, I want to be optimistic about the trajectory that the world is in right now. But it just seems to me like there's an awful lot of people who are living in an alternate reality, who live in a state of denial, who aren't enlightened, who don't see things for what they are. A lot of people who, instead of worshiping God, they worship money. The Keystone Pipeline is a good microcosm of what's going on in the world, especially in this country. That's what's happening. These billionaires cannot get enough money. It's just an all-consuming. They just cannot get enough. So yeah, let's go ahead and spoil the earth here permanently, so I can make a few bucks more to add to my bank account. Because I want to live forever and I can take it with me. It's just, I don't know. But anyway, yeah, back to the drops thing. I think I agree with that all the drops are really good. And I think you mentioned, Richard, about a moment when Spirit was sending down and looking for something good and looking for a receptor. I think that that's something that is always taking place all over the planet. And it's just a matter of us human beings. Are we receivers?
Right.
Can we receive that?
Right.
And it may be just to smile at somebody, just to, somebody's had a bad day, to smile at them. It could change things. And again, the ripple thing, you do that one good thing and it ripples on out. But yeah, I think, Jeff, that they are inseparable. But so many people are consumed by their ego, and that's all that they can live their life based upon is their ego. And you're right. It's, every morning I try to affirm to myself that I'm suppressing my ego and embracing my spirit. And I try to stay in the moment, and I try to make decisions all day long from a basis of spirituality, from a basis of empathy, instead of necessarily what my ego says is best for me. But I am in a position where I can do that. But I do believe. What did you say, Richard? That Tom said that if you're born with spirituality, you lose your spirituality, and then later in life you regain your spirituality. That's a good life, right?
That's a description of a perfect life.
A perfect life. Okay. Okay. So if we do our thing, if we do our part, I know, Rachel, you said you want to do more. You want to do more to help, and of course we all do. We all, when we want to do a good work, we want it to be magnified. We want it to, but we can't judge whether or not something is a small work, a big work, or, because we really don't know. We don't understand spirit, because we're human beings. I think one of the things I love, Tom Sawyer said, was that if a human being were to suddenly attain total knowledge, they would combust.
Yeah.
That it's just physically impossible. So all we're doing is just reaching and the near-death experiencers, what they do. Okay, so at one point Tom was in total knowledge. At one point, he understood everything. Now he came back as a human being. Well, he doesn't have total knowledge, but it's like if you just ask a question, that it could spark something that he just just a slender thread of information that he might be able to tap into. Well, all any of us can do is to try to do that on our own by opening up, by becoming receivers, receptors to the drops, the many drops that are coming down or coming from spirit, which is all of us. And Tom, yes, Jesus is all of us. We're all is one. We're all made of the same substance. We're all made of energy, divine, holy energy. And there is no separating. So yes, Jesus, we're Christ as well. We all are. And everything that's wrong with this world is based on fear. Everything that's right in the world is based on love. That's what I've come to believe. I mean, obviously, it's a much more complex than that. But I'm just trying to focus on my love and expanding my love, sending my love out to the rest of the planet. That's my work right now. That's what I'm trying to do.
One thing that comes to mind, Bruce, is the concept of when you use the phrase suppressing the ego, and I would offer the change of not suppressing, but using the ego for the spiritual purposes. Like who you are, the body you have, the psychology you have, the talents you have are like a stained glass window. All good on its own, but when the light shines through it is when it really becomes beautiful.
Right. Yeah, for example, when I'm going for my walks,
Yeah.
if I say hello to a person and they don't respond, they just, when I see the next person, I don't let my ego dictate what I want to do. I'm going to say hello to them and wave, and I may get a smile. That's what I mean. It just, yes, I agree with what you said. Yes, use it in a healthy way.
Yeah, to move on, kick the dust off your feet and move on to the next person who is open and receptive.
Exactly.
If they don't accept you here, don't let your ego pull you down into, oh, I didn't do a good job.
Right.
Or, I'm doing the wrong thing or something like that. So the ego gets you to the next place and interacts with the person.
Mhm.
But the ego is just carrying spirit around, I mean, our body just carrying, it's an incarnation of physicalness. So, there's a reason why we're physical, now. And there's some responsibility in that, that goes along with the spirituality. The more spiritual you are, the more responsibility you have.
Right. I mean, that's the reason we're here. I mean, why otherwise we'd have just remained in a state of spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Why did we come and be born in these bodies? I mean, there has to be a reason. I've always felt like by being born into these bodies on some unique spiritual way, we're able to gain more traction moving forward, doing something that is spiritual work.
Yeah. Good.
Which is everything. Everything is spiritual work.
Yeah, exactly.
There is nothing that isn't.
Exactly.
And we are, I mean, spirit is the divine essence is constantly flowing, and the ego's position is to allow that to be expressed as the individual piece, to go back to that puzzle thing, our individual piece of that puzzle.
Exactly.
Creation at a certain level is so that the divine essence can experience itself as us, as this place.
Right. So
and as such, we're just all integral pieces of how that works. That the ego has gotten so big to think that it can disconnect itself, which of course is impossible, but to think it can, and then act upon its own is, again, to come back to that term, is part of the great mistake.
Yeah, that's the living in denial is
Right.
what I would call that. But wouldn't you say that what you're saying is to become conduits for allowing spirit to enter this, what you call physical reality?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, Wayne Dyer, for one, said any person can become a miracle worker. It's just a matter of opening up and being that huge conduit.
One of my favorite sayings these days is that Jesus' quote in the Bible that says, "And ye shall do greater works than I."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think that is amazing to even begin to contemplate. And ye shall do greater works than I. There ain't nothing held back.
Yeah. It's just a matter of believing it, believing that you can do it. And I'm sure, the ego has its place there somewhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We talked about this last time. You come back from a divine, revelatory experience. As soon as you come back, you put your ego back on, because your ego is what is how you interface here. Your ego is what keeps you from stepping on a snake. An ego is what, I need to eat. I'm going to eat, and I'm going to eat something enjoyable. I mean, is that good? Is that bad? No, it's wonderful. It's what it is. Again, that we have allowed the ego to become so dominant that it has attached itself to whatever we see as what gives us pleasure, and then to push away everything that may or may not cause us pain, is, again, part of that, I hate to keep using the term, part of that mistake of identity.
Yep.
Well, gang, it's time to close up this session. This was outstanding. And as I reflect back on the conversation today, I know we've sort of termed ourselves as the band. And in a lot of cases, we've heard tonight references to a puzzle, the connection, things that we are. And I just want to personally share my own appreciation too, is because of each of you and the notes that you're playing. So we're here from the saxophone player tonight, right? But the notes being your voice, your resonance on who you are, it helps me. And it's one of the great benefits I get from this is as I'm really, looking to grow the re-emphasis on spirituality is I have here my own support group of the band members around me. And a band can't be a band with just one, right? We can attempt to play one instrument and that could sound pretty good. But man, when you put it together, it sounds awesome. And that to me was what tonight was all about. It sure sounded awesome. And in a way that just helps to inspire me to continue to go forward, to do this more, and to just let it ripple, through me and wherever it may go, to just help encourage everyone to grow and develop that spirituality we were all talking about. So until next time, know that these sessions are now on the schedule for every Sunday. Feel free to come, join, pass it around. It doesn't matter. It's just, as I see it, it's to open up the doors for those that really just want to be able to talk spiritually, and be able to reap some of the benefits I know I just shared that we get from each other, and boost in energy I feel at the end of these sessions to go out and carry on my work or whatever it may be, and to contribute to their part to the band. So if you have any questions or thoughts or ideas on that, let me know. But thanks a million, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, are you gonna stop recording now?